of that. I
And
can
it's
see
not for
that.
him, it's against us.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is just terrible. He could be a green, a vegetable.
Right.
Yeah, meanwhile, he was in town like early
Well, for
Sunday
Rockwell.
morning,
Sure,
shaking hands.
Oh, really?
and
It's
handing
fine.
it- Yeah.
You know,
Was he
something
really?
he
I didn't
should.
see Nick, but I saw this guy.
Nick's
shit.
been,
Nick's been around.
No, I
He's been out of
know,
work.
I know. This guy that was like, everywhere you drive, you see his signs.
Yeah, they're all over now.
Yeah, everywhere.
All over.
But he's not doing that. He has people, he has a whole organization.
Well, he's got a whole,
Okay, guys. Chav Zayin Amud Beis 27b4.
before.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from the bottom. In the middle of the line, Hatokea L'so Chabor o L'so Chadus. So our Mishnah said that if you blow into a pit, right, bor is a pit, dus is a cistern. So then if you hear the sound of the shofar, you are Yotze. And if you
Yeah, the
hear the echo,
You know.
so you're not Yotze.
So that means it's the acoustic.
Shofar. What are you hearing? How does hearing work?
Vibrations.
Right. So
Oh,
the
sound,
air,
right, the air
right?
vibrating.
The air, whether the air is being projected out and it's being changed by your mouth, which we call talking, or whether the air is being blown through an instrument, kia shofar, that air, based on the instrument or based on the mouth is really an instrument, that air causes ripples
Right,
in
sound
the
waves.
sound
I can see
waves,
them, yes.
right? Sound waves. Those sound waves hit your ear. Those sound waves go in through the inner ear to
Cause
the
a vibration on the
they
tympanum.
right cause a vibration on the
Starts there.
eardrum, whatever it's called.
Tympan.
Something,
Tympanic
something,
membrane.
the tympanic membrane
Right.
that causes a
These little bones.
right causes a little further vibration of these bones. The bones cause a vibration in a fluid-filled sac with little
The cochlea.
hairs, right?
Well, that's pretty good.
And
You
actually
probably did go to medical school. Wow.
actually creates a chemical
I know a
reaction
little bit about a lot.
that a chemical reaction that produces
about most things.
electricity, right? Like electrical stimulation. That electrical stimulation travels from the nerve to the brain, and the brain decodes it. It's pretty cool when you think about it, right? It's pretty cool. Like we know you hear a shofar and you think, oh, that's a shofar, right? So that the process of recognizing that that's a shofar sound is just fascinating, okay? But when we say we hear something directly, it means that we hear the sound of the shofar
Through that whole process.
now.
Directly,
So
not reflected.
but think about it for a second.
Why does it matter?
Are we hearing
Well, in
the
a bar
sound
it
of the
does.
shofar directly, or are we hearing partly directly, maybe reflected? Maybe it depends on where we're standing.
If you're outside, then it's only direct.
What if you're standing?
Because it's not reflecting off the
depends what's
surface
around,
coming
yeah.
back.
Right. I mean, let's say you're outside and there's nothing around, and it's the
Yeah.
middle of a field, and the shofar blower is standing right there, and his
So-
shofar is aimed at
It's
you.
going one way.
Right? So then you're hearing the direct sound. But if you're in a shul,
It's bouncing off
okay,
the walls. It's,
Right.
coming
it's
off
bouncing
the
off the
ceilings.
walls, it's
The other
bouncing,
people, the chairs,
bouncing right,
it's
everything, right? So,
They reflected
so
off a lot of different
in
things.
reality, it's hard to say that we're hearing the non-reflected sound of the shofar. We're probably hearing
Some of it.
most of it. Most of what we're hearing is probably non-reflected, but certainly there is a reflected sound of the shofar that we're hearing. So the echo that the Gemara is going to talk about can't mean only reflected sound, because if it meant only reflected sound, then nobody would ever be Yotze shofar unless you were
In the field.
in a field, or unless you were blowing for yourself, right? Or if you were in a field with absolutely nothing around. So it can't mean, so just as we think through it logically, it can't mean reflected sound as opposed to non-reflected sound. So when we say you've heard the shofar, it means that everybody when they hear anything is hearing a combination of reflected sound and non-reflected sound. Because when I'm looking over here and talking to Ron and you're hearing it, you're hearing reflected sound also. You're hearing sound, but you're also hearing reflected sound. However, the human ear
Can't distinguish.
can't distinguish between those two when the reflected sound arrives so
the same time,
closely to the actual sound. So for us, even though probably there's some way to measure it, even though we're hearing both regular sound and reflected sound, we don't process it as an echo. And if we don't process it as an echo, then the halacha doesn't consider it an echo. What do we process as an echo?
When there's a gap.
When there's a delay.
Sound,
When reflected sound is heard through a delay, then it's an echo.
So there are measurements for how high a sukkah should be, how the most high it could be. Is there a measurement for what a bar has to be smaller than to be a bar?
A bar?
A hole.
Pit.
A pit. In other words, if you're in the Grand Canyon and the reflection comes, 5 seconds later, it wouldn't matter because that's open on either end, but there's still reflected sound. So how big, how large would a pit be?
So we're talking about someone who is standing inside of the pit. So it's certainly big enough for a person, at least one, perhaps we're going to see from the Gemara, or people who are standing inside the pit. So we're talking about a decent sized pit,
the Yosef
right?
size pit.
Yosef sized pit, or a cistern, a big cistern. Right, that's what we're talking about. We talk about a barrel, we're going to talk about blowing into a barrel. So obviously we're not talking about a person standing in a barrel.
Right.
That's a whole different thing.
What about the case if, like, you're at one end of a football field, you blow the shofar, someone's at the other end, the time that, between the time you blow and the time they hear, it's measurable. It's not
Yeah, but it's the sound. It's not a reflection of the
It's still
sound.
But I'm saying
In
there's a
order for
gap.
it to be considered an
Travels at the
echo,
speed of sound.
right? In order for it to be considered an echo, it
7
needs
miles
to
an
have
hour.
two characteristics.
1100 something feet
It
in
needs to be a
seconds.
reflected sound,
11,
and it needs, and there needs to be a
When you
delay.
say reflected,
Yeah,
bouncing
okay, if you're
Bouncing off of
yards
something.
away, it's 3
That
seconds later.
sound has to have bounced off of
Right.
something.
That's the original sound
Right.
at the other end
Right.
of the football field.
Right. Now, in other words, if you're at the other end of the
So it's just the
football
gap, but
field,
not
you
the
are
reflection.
hearing the sound.
You're hearing the actual
Right?
sound.
It just takes, sound travels, I don't know, whatever the speed of
Thousand
sound.
feet a second.
Speed of sound.
How much?
700 miles an hour. 700 miles an hour.
700 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Fifth of a mile a second.
A fifth of a mile a second. So if you're at the end of a football field, how big is a football field?
300 yards.
That much I know. Even not 300 yards.
300
300 feet.
feet, 100 yards, right?
Right, 100 yards. So how much is that? I don't know. Maybe it takes a second. Maybe there's a second
Yeah.
delay or something like that. But not even.
Not even. Right.
A third of a second.
Okay, but even if there is a little bit of a delay technically, that was scientifically measurable, you're hearing the unreflected sound. Now you might be hearing reflected sound also, but you can't distinguish between the unreflected sound and the reflected sound. But if you're, let's say, in the Grand Canyon, right, you yell, so a few seconds later you hear that yell coming back at you.
Right.
Right? So that is the reflected sound with a delay. Reflected sound with a delay is
No good.
considered an echo. Right?
That's why you can't listen to it on a tape, for example, because you're not actually hearing
Well,
the real
that
sound.
all right. So that raises a whole interesting question, and that is, can you be mekayim the mitzvah of tekiyas shofar? Let's say through a microphone. Can you? Yeah. Yes. Right.
Okay.
I mean, otherwise, nothing to talk about.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
There is McGill and Purim. How about
Oh,
McGill?
okay. So the reason I'm saying tekiyas shofar is because it is a mitzvah midioraisa.
Okay.
Right? Can you be mekayim the mitzvah of tekiyas shofar through a microphone? Meaning, let's say that it was a conservative synagogue and they had a microphone, or let's say it was an Orthodox
And the
synagogue and they
microphone was
used
on by accident.
they used the Somet microphone, or the microphone was on, or something like that, and you heard the shofar through the amplification of the microphone. Have you been Yotze? Or on a Dirabanan level, if you heard Mikra Megillah
Right.
through a microphone, are you Yotze? So obviously, lichatchilo, we try not to hear these things through a microphone. Why? Because what is a microphone doing? Right? A microphone. How does a microphone work? That it is amplifying the sound. Right? What does a microphone do? Right?
Air
It
pressure,
converts
electrical.
it converts the sound waves to electrical energy. It amplifies the electrical energy.
It makes
lots of
screeches.
Right? The electrical energy comes out. That electrical energy comes out as sound waves, which we then process. Okay?
You use it on Echa, or you using a microphone in the
Oh,
show?
right. Well, Eicha is certainly not Midiraisa, and in main shul we have used the microphone for Megillah before, right? It's
What about like a megaphone?
wait. So
It's just not-
even though there's some debate about it, there's no question. I shouldn't say no question. There's some debate about.
What is
Has to
the
be.
There's some, there,
Has to be.
What is the debate? What is
the debate is: are you actually hearing the words of the Megillah? In other words, are you hearing words? When I speak to you, right? So my breath is causing sound waves that are traveling across the table, and your ears are hearing those sound waves and converting them into electrical impulses, and your brain is saying boring, 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 or whatever it is.
But is that halachically what's required?
That's hearing. That's
That's
what.
the question.
That's the definition of hearing. Now, is hearing electrical impulses? In other words, through the medium of electrical impulses. In other words, when I produce the sound, I'm not producing electrical impulses. What am I producing?
Sound waves.
I'm producing sound waves. Yes, it is true that you ultimately are processing that as electrical. Your brain needs the electrical impulses to understand it. But I'm producing sound waves. Now, if I'm speaking into a microphone, so I'm producing sound waves, but those sound waves are now being
converted.
changed
Right.
So to speak?
into electrical energy that is then amplified, that is then projected out, right? Creating these sound waves that you then process. So is that considered the same? So there are, of course, opinions that say that you should not be using a microphone for anything. Right, you should not be using a microphone for anything, and it means you can't make havdalah over the phone for somebody who can't make havdalah, right? Because it's using a telephone is basically the same thing as using this,
What about
right?
a hearing aid or a
Right, so,
cochlear implant?
right? So that's as far as there are certainly people who say that. However, there are those who are lenient when it comes to a dirabanan, allowing Megillah to be read over a microphone if it's litzorech rabim, because there's a lot of people and they can't hear otherwise. So they do allow that. There are people who would allow that. However, when it comes generally to a doraisa, that is not allowed. So on a doraisa level, like Tekiyas Shofar, we would not do it. Okay? And even shuls that have tzomit microphones generally have them turned off by timer on Rosh Hashanah, so as not to create any issues with hearing the shofar through the microphone.
So what he mentioned, so like, let's say you want to say Havdalah to a shut-in over the phone. Would they be Yosei Havdalah by hearing you
So
say?
that's the question. In other words, according to those who say that that this production, that what you hear is the same as your voice. So certainly on a dirabanan level, you could do it. You could make havdalah for that individual, especially if that person is davened already and now their chiyuv is only midirabanan. Right, that would not be a question. As far as a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, so that's a similar question. Basically, most poskim are makil when it comes to a hearing aid because
Otherwise, you didn't hear it all. I mean,
literally,
Otherwise,
all
you'd be
right, I mean,
protest.
no, but there are people who are mock. Listen, there are always people who
Well,
are mocked not
always.
to, right? Not to,
Right.
not to.
You can either not hear it or you
And so
hear
they
it
would
with
turn
hearing
it
aids,
off.
so you're better off
In
not
order to hear
hearing it.
Megillah, even if they don't hear it as well, they would turn off the hearing aid.
Come up.
Well, it depends.
With someone who's got
I mean,
a-
I mean, listen, there are people who can't hear. I mean, with
Right,
a cochlear implant,
Right.
right? If you didn't have that, you couldn't hear
couldn't
at all.
hear anything, right.
Right? You couldn't hear at all. So again, it all
Just asking,
depends.
I'm not-
It all depends. And the bigger, well, I wouldn't say the bigger question, but an interesting question is, can you talk to a person who has a hearing aid? Because what are you doing by talking to a person who has a hearing aid? Right? You are creating these electrical impulses. Now, one thing to say you're creating the electrical impulses inside the person's ear because that's the way Hashem created us. That's how we hear. But this is a device, right? This device is doing something. So can you speak to someone who has a hearing aid? Anyway, be that as it may, for the purpose of, but these are
Right, getting questions.
I mean, of course, you're talking, you're allowed to talk. I mean,
Wife can't talk to husband on Shabbos.
This is similar to setting off the motion sensor on an alarm that if it's not your intention.
and the lo nichale, you don't care about it, or all these kinds of.
But I was just talking to someone about this. They actually switched them all off.
They are
you're
sure.
on your hearing aid? 'Cause-
It's one,
No, they're motion
actually
sensors.
outside, sensor, like if you're walking down the
Inside.
street.
No,
it's
like
inside.
the,
Inside, where the
motion
light goes on and
detectors.
off when
Yeah,
you
like when you walk into a.
Right, a motion detector, right? There are people who just flip that. And we have in our house, we have a Shabbos switch on the alarm. You flip the Shabbos switch, and that cuts off the motion detectors.
Right, the motion detectors inside.
Right, the motion detectors. Okay, so be that as it may. When we come to shofar, we're talking about two options. Either you're hearing the direct and or immediately heard reflected sound, in which case you're yotze, or let me just finish, or
The delay. The delayed sound.
or you're hearing the delayed reflected sound, which we consider an echo. Yeah,
But reflected sound is by definition always delayed, but you can't.
but that we're not
Detect it.
perceiving
Measurably
it. Correct.
delayed.
It's always delayed.
But then you're always hearing the direct sound with the reflected sound.
Right.
So
No, you could have heard it if there's a big enough delay that you aren't hearing the direct sound anymore.
No, I'm saying, but if you're in a shul,
Right.
I mean,
You could either hear
you're-
direct sound, direct and reflected.
We're talking-
both at the
right,
same
we're
time.
talking-
in a
right,
canyon.
delay.
You're saying.
Let's look at those three possibilities. You could hear either direct sound, like
Just by itself.
You're in the field. There's nothing between you and the shofar. Direct sound. You could hear a combination of direct and reflected
And that's
sound,
okay.
and that's fine as long as you don't perceive it. But you don't
It's two different.
as long as you hear both.
Yeah.
As long as you hear
Right,
both,
right.
and one doesn't mix in with the other, which could be a problem.
Well,
Well, they are,
But
by
even if they're
definition,
mixed-
they're mixing in.
No,
Yeah.
they're mixing in. But let's say that.
You just don't know.
Well,
You can't tell where one began. and the
okay,
other
but let's
ended.
say it is. So let's say, okay, so now we're going to create 4 categories. Okay, category number 1 is just
Absolutely.
direct sound.
Right.
Category number 2 is direct and reflected sound, where you are unable to discern the gap in the reflected
Right.
sound. Okay.
and that's pretty
Category
much
number,
every sound,
and that's pretty much every sound.
unless
Correct.
you're in a vacuum.
Correct. Or you're in a field.
Or field or something.
Well,
Right.
No, even if you're in a field, I mean,
Okay. So you're in a vacuum. Or if you're in a vacuum, you're not going to hear anything because there's
You
no
don't hear
air.
any sound in the
All
back
right.
because there's
Number
no air.
3, right? Situation number 3 is where you hear the direct sound and you discern the reflected sound, which comes at a later time, and that's you're hearing the direct sound and the echo.
Right.
Situation number 4 is you don't
Just
hear
the
the direct
you
sound
just
at
hear
all.
the
You
reflected
just hear
sound.
the echo.
They
Okay.
blow away from you towards the wall, and then you hear the sound coming back.
Well, or there's a
The
big
one is
enough
like-
gap between
Or
the two. that you
we're
missed
going to
it,
see
but
we're
in
going to
theory.
see you're standing outside of the pit, and the shofar blower is inside the pit.
Right, and it reflects.
So all you hear is the reflected sound, right? All you hear is the echo. That's a possibility. Okay.
have you been in the Capitol building where John Adams used to like?
Yeah, you could whisper the whispering thing from one side to
They
the
have that
other.
at Grand Central.
Yeah.
They have it
There's
at
a
Grand
whispering.
Central.
They have it in
You
like
can be on
Turin
one
or
side of
something
Grand
like that.
Central by the
A
oyster
whisper.
bar, and they have this sort of conduit, and they have a place all the way on the other side of Grand Central where you could hear.
You have to whisper
Yeah.
into something?
Yeah.
Well, just
Hey, just like if you whisper in that area, somehow the sound
The
travels.
sound's focused, the sound.
So I guess you have to be
Something
careful where you have private conversations.
Yeah, well,
It's a-
don't
it's
have
a-
it in the
it's a-
whispering corner over
It's a
there.
it's parabola on
Oh,
top of the roof.
that's a reflected
What?
sound.
And the sound is
Yeah.
exactly. No, it is.
I don't know if it
That's
was.
a reflected channel.
All right.
That's like a megaphone.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I asked, what about
All
a
right.
megaphone?
I'm hearing a lot of reflected sounds.
You use
Okay.
a megaphone?
So you could use a yes,
The
you could.
school has that also.
Everybody,
That's the same
everybody
idea as a
agrees.
parabola.
Everybody agrees that you can use a megaphone
Because it's not doing anything.
But
That's an echo.
for doing anything.
Even a
Even
chauffeur,
blaming?
you can blow a chauffeur into a megaphone.
Yes, because all it's doing is
Channel.
No,
focusing.
it's
Not an
reflecting.
electric
There's
one.
walls.
Not an
No, there.
electric
Reflecting
Well,
off the,
it-
you
that's
can't tell the difference.
that's true, but it is directing.
Yeah,
It's focusing.
It's focusing the
It's focusing.
sound in a certain direction, but it's also reflecting
Right,
off the
okay.
walls of the
We
megaphone.
could try that in Shaw.
Okay. All right,
Now
you'll
go
see
on.
me on Shabbos. We can get like pom poms and a megaphone.
One of those giant, French horn thing.
All right, you heard it here first. Okay.
Let me know, I'll definitely show
Give me a G. Okay.
Wormspiel.
Okay. So back to the Gemara. Amar Rav Huna. We're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom. Amar Rav Huna. Lo shanu ella laosan haomdim al sfas habor. Right? Lo shanu. Right? This was not taught.
Right.
In other words, this halacha in the Mishnah was lo shanu ella, means it was only taught
Taught.
regarding laosan haomdim al sfas habor. Regarding the people who are standing on the
Outer edge.
on the outer edge, they're out of the pit. Aval osan haomdim babur, but those who are standing inside the pit, along with the shofar blower, yotsu, they fulfilled their obligation.
Right.
Why? Because even though they've heard clearly they've heard a combination of direct and reflected sound, they can't discern the difference, so they're yotze. But the people who are standing al sfas habur, outside the pit, on the rim, if you will, of the pit, all they're hearing is the reflected and delayed sound of the shofar. And therefore, they're not yotze. Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa that supports this idea. Hatokea l'so chabur, a person who, in other words, this is a brisa that pretty much mirrors the statement of our Mishnah. Hatokea l'so chabur o l'so chadus, yotza, he's fulfilled his obligation. Right? Meaning that somebody who hears it inside, he has fulfilled his obligation. V'hatzanan, wait a second. All right?
Lawyers.
V'hatzanan, we've learned lo
Our
yotza.
Mishnah says lawyers.
Right? What does our Mishnah say? If you go back to our Mishnah says lo yotza. So how can we have, right, the Brisa says yotza, the Mishnah says lo yotza, elalav shmamina kidu Rav Huna. But rather, the only way to resolve the contradiction between the Mishnah and the Brisa is to say it's coming to highlight Rav Huna's position. When the Brisa says you hear the sound of the shofar and you're yotze, it's referring to the people who are standing where? Inside the pit. When our Mishnah says you hear the shofar and you're not yotze, what's it referring to?
People outside.
The people who stand outside of the pit, and they are hearing the echo, right? They are hearing the halachic echo. And therefore, Shma Mina learned from here that Rav Huna's position is supported by this contradiction between the Mishnah and the Brisa. So, right. So the way in which this was learned was first we mentioned the statement of the Mishnah, then we introduced Rav Huna's opinion, then we brought the Brisa, which is the contradiction to the Mishnah, to support Rav Huna. That's one way of approaching it. The same exact conclusion is going to be reached by approaching it a little bit of a different way, right? The question is, do we go A, B, C, or do we go A, C, B, right? Maybe the better, do we add 1 plus 2 plus 3, or do we add 1 plus 3 plus 2? The answer is going to be the same. It's just different steps to get there. And that's what our Gemara is going to say by now presenting. We just had the 1 plus 2 plus 3. Now we're getting the 1 plus 3 plus 2. Here it's going to begin with the contradiction between the Mishnah and the Brisa. The first time we learned it, just 2 lines up, it began with Rav Huna. And then, right, the Mishnah, Rav Huna, and the Brisa supporting, that must be the only way to interpret it. Now it's going to begin with the Mishnah and Brisa contradicting each other, and Rav Huna coming along to explain the contradiction. Ika derame lahu mirma. There are those right? Ika. There's another opinion, dirami luhu mirma, that throws these two against each other. What are these two against each other? The Mishnah and the Brisa. Tanan, here's the Mishnah. Here it comes. You all know this Mishnah. Hatokea l'soch habor l'soch hadus lo yatsa. That's our Mishnah. Hatanya, wait a second. We have a Brisa that says yatsa. How could that be? Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says lo kashya. Kan la'osan ha'omdim al sfas habor. Here, where it says lo yatsa in our Mishnah, it's referring to those who are standing al sfas habor, outside of the bor. And kan, the Brisa, which says yatsa, is la'osan ha'omdim babor, those who are standing inside the bor. Okay, good. Everybody happy? Good. All right, good. Amar Rabba. Right, Rabba comes along. Next page.
Everybody. Somebody's got to be on there.
Amar Rabba, Chavches Amud Aleph. Rabba with a B is going to give us, or with a Bays, is going to give us a different case. What's the case here? We're not 100% sure of what the case is. We'll learn the words, but then we'll try to figure out what the case is. So he says, Shama miktsas tikia babur, umiktsas tikia al sfas habur. So what happened? You heard some of it in the bor, and some of it outside of the bor. So let's think about how this could
You were
be.
evil
climbing
Knievel,
out.
and you were jumping at just that
Oh,
moment.
you were climbing out as the chauffeur got blown.
Right, you were climbing out, right? You're climbing out, you're still climbing up the ladder,
Right, on the way out of the
right?
ball.
On the way out of the bor, and you hear the shofar.
From inside and then
From
outside.
inside
You
the
don't
bor.
stop.
So you're
You stay
hearing,
inside and
you're
be yotze, you
hearing
keep
the
walking.
direct plus imperceptible reflection.
Right.
Now you climb out of the bor, and you continue to hear the shofar. But what you're hearing now is just the echo, the time delayed
And these are different
reflection.
notes, presumably. Not, I mean, right?
Well, different.
Like the Kia, Shavar. kind
You
of
haven't.
thing.
You're hearing both.
It's not the
pieces.
same tequila.
It's even if it could be the same tequila. It could be the same tequila, right? It could be the same tequila.
And that would raise how much of it do you have to hear?
Right, so that's
when you're inside the bar.
Right, so you would have to
If
have
you're
to
2 out of
portray
3
the
of the
scenario.
Two out of three
No, you'd have to
Shavarms or
you'd have to portray the scenario. Let's say that the tekiah, the general tekiah that we hold for a shvarim trua is 16 beats,
Okay.
right? 16 beats, okay, or depending upon who's blowing the shofar, but generally it's 16 or 18 beats, okay. So if you do 16 or 18 beats, it's not 16 or 18 seconds, it's much shorter than
Right.
that. But that's enough time where you could, let's say you were on the top rung of the ladder, you're still inside the board.
And you didn't stop.
Right? And you didn't stop. You heard one
So if you
note,
get 9
you heard
seconds,
one sound,
9
you're 9
beats,
beats while you were
and
in the
7
board,
while you're out.
and 7 while you're out. So you've heard
More than
both,
half.
right? You've heard both. So is that sufficient? 9 beats, if all you had heard inside the bore would be 9 beats, it would not have been sufficient. Because you needed to hear 16 beats, because the tekiah has to equal the shvarim trua that follows it. So 9 beats is not sufficient. And you didn't hear just 9 beats, you heard 16 beats. However, you heard 9 beats in the
Inside,
bore
7
and
outside.
7 beats outside of the bore. Can you put those together? Perhaps that's what Rabbah's talking
Are
about.
they giving this example as just to sort of make their point, or like sometimes people are actually in pits, like listening to the shofar?
The chauffeur blower. I mean, why didn't he just climb out of the pit?
Like, what are you
Blow it upstairs.
like,
I mean,
what are you
you know?
doing in a pit anyway?
Yeah.
Okay,
Or they're just- as an
so
example,
Or is
as
this
an
supposed
as
to
an
be just a
extreme
proof?
example.
Don't think it
so
through.
this could be an intellectual. I could
Yeah.
explain it as an intellectual exercise,
Right.
meaning that the Gemara is simply drawing this scenario to highlight the point,
Right.
or we know that there was a period of time when the Jews were not allowed to observe religious precepts in public. So maybe blowing the shofar inside a cave
Right,
or inside a bore or inside a cistern was the only way they could do it. So you could explain it to say
okay.
it is actual
There's a
halacha.
marketing fight in Beirut Wien on
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
page.
Okay, so what does Rabbah say? Rabbah gives us this case. Shama miktsas tekiah babur. You heard part of the tekiah in the bor. Umiktsas tekiya al sfasabor. Now I said we could either explain it one note, or you heard part of the shvarim trua in the bor and the rest of the shvarim trua outside of the bor. However you want to do it. Or you heard tekiya and shvarim trua in the bor and then the second tekiya out. I mean, however you want to do it. According to Rabba Yotza. Okay, that's case number 1. And now we get case number 2 from Rabba. Miktsas tekiya kodem sheya'ale amud hashachar. You heard part of the tekiya before the sun rose, right? Which we call not astronomical sunrise, which is Neitz Hachama, but the brightening of the horizon, which is called Alos HaShachar, and that's approximately 72 minutes before sunrise. That's when the sky starts to brighten up. You start to see the rays of the sun. So the person blowing shofar was so excited to fulfill the mitzvah that he started a little early. He started before Alos HaShachar. Before Alos, or here it's called Amud HaShachar. Same thing. Umiktsas tekiya la'achar sheya'ale Amud HaShachar. And you heard part of it before and part of it after. So Rabbah says lo yatsa, right? You haven't fulfilled your obligation. So wait a second. Don't these seem to be?
No, one is the beginning is Yatza, and
right?
one at the end is Yatza.
In other words, don't these seem to be similar cases? Right? In the case of the guy climbing out of the pit,
One is it starts.
part he's heard directly,
The original part he heard.
he's heard echo, right? Part he can fulfill his obligation, part he can't fulfill his obligation.
But he
And what
started
does Rabbah
first,
say?
Yatza.
Rabbah says Yatza. On the other hand, so he hears now before Tekiya Shofar where he's not Yotze, and now he hears before Alos HaShachar where he's not Yotze, because the earliest time for Tekiya Shofar is Alos HaShachar, and now he hears after Alos HaShachar. So why shouldn't it be the same thing? Why shouldn't he be just as Yotze as the guy who's climbing out of the pit?
Because you have to start it.
That's the question, right? You have answers, I understand, right? Yes, of course. But that's the question. And that was what was bothering Abaye. Amar le Abaye. Abaye said to Rabbah, my shna hasam diba'ina kula tekiya bechiyuva veleka hachanami ba'ina kula tekiya bechiyuva veleka. So Abaye is saying, I don't understand. In the case where the guy's climbing out of the pit, right? We require you to hear the shofar being blown directly, right? And part of what you're hearing is not that, and yet nevertheless we say you're Yotze. Isn't that the same thing here in our case? Right? Hacha, here in this case, the case of the time difference, Nami ba'ina kula tekiya bechiyuva veleka. So why in both cases is the halacha not the same Rabbah? That's what Abai is asking. So the Gemara says, Hachi hashta, is it really the case that they're similar? Right? Hachi, is it thus hashta? Is it really this way? Are they really the same? Hasam, no, the Gemara is going to say they're not the same, and you probably felt this intuitively, that what? Hasam, there in the case of the time difference, Laila lavzman chiyuvahu klal, right? If you blow the shofar before Amlos HaShachar, if you blow the shofar before Alos HaShachar, it is considered blowing the shofar at night. And there is no way that shofar sound that you hear at night can ever count. Right? There's no way, nobody hearing that shofar sound can be Yosei with that shofar sound. Hacha, bor, but when you blow the shofar in the bor,
you could be.
Makom chiyuvuhu la'osan ha'omdim babor. Right? That the sound that you are hearing in the bor is a perfectly good sound. And even when you come out of the bor, you're still hearing a sound, and even if that sound doesn't work for you, if that was all you heard,
It does work for the
it
people
does.
still in
It's
the bar.
still a kosher sound.
Sound for the
It's
people in
still
the bar.
originating as a kosher sound.
Right.
Whereas the sound that the shofar guy blows at night is not originating as a kosher sound. So that's the difference. Okay, that's the difference. That's what the Gemara says to explain the difference between the two. Lememra, this means to say, says the Gemara, Desavar Rabba, that Rabba holds. In other words, we're going back to the first case. The case where you're climbing, you're on the ladder, you're near the top, you hear part of the sound, you get out of the pit, now you hear the rest of the sound, but what you're hearing is an echo. So, and Rabba said, you're Yotze. Does this mean to imply, says the Gemara, the Savar Rabba, that Rabba holds, Shama Sof Tekiya below Tchilas Tekiya Yotza? That if you heard the end of the Tekiya without hearing the beginning of the Tekiya,
He just held the other way though.
right, that you would be Yotze. In other words, what? Yes, I understand it's switched, the Gemara switches it around, but let's understand. What is Rabbah saying? Rabbah is saying, as long as you are hearing part of it, kosher,
And the whole thing is
you fulfilled your obligation. Right? That's what
That's what it
Rabbah.
seems to be saying.
That's what Rabbah seems to be saying. The way we've explained it, we're going to change that down the road.
No doubt.
But that's what Rabbah seems to be saying. The way we've explained it, you've heard kosher first part of the shofar, a not kosher second part of the shofar. But Rabbah says you're Yotze. Lememra, this would imply that Rabbah holds you only have to hear part of the shofar blowing in order to be Yotze. Which means, let's say that you walked into shul late, right? In other words, you missed the first part of the first tekiah, right? You're just like, you know, like,
Don't you have to hear the bracha too?
right? The bracha, no, the bracha is not ma'akev. The bracha is not ma'akev. If you didn't hear the bracha and all you heard was tekiah shofar, you would have fulfilled your obligation, right? And you dashed into shul. You dashed into shul, but when you got into shul, it was in the middle of that very first tekiah. So do we say no problem, right? Because what does Rabbah hold?
Partial is enough.
Rabbah holds that partial is sufficient. So Lememra, does this mean to say, does this mean to imply, the Savar Rabbah, that Rabbah holds, Shama Sof Tekiah below Techila, if you heard the end of the Tekiah without hearing the beginning of the Tekiah, Yotza, Umimela, and if that's true, then certainly Techilas Tekiah below Sof Tekiah Yotza.
Right.
Certainly if you heard the beginning of the Tekiah, but you didn't hear the end of the tekiah, you should be Yotze. In other words, if part of the sound is sufficient, is that what Rabbah is saying? That part of the sound is sufficient?
Don't say part kosher.
Doesn't seem to make sense, says the Gemara. And the Gemara is now going to try to disprove that idea. Tashma, come in here and let's see if indeed that is what Rabbah is implying. Okay? So the Gemara brings the following case. We've learned this before. Okay, so it's going to sound familiar to you. If it doesn't sound familiar to you, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Go back to the video.
Taka barishona. We only learned, it's like a page ago. Taka
I
barishona.
wasn't here. That's why it doesn't
Right?
sound familiar.
Taka.
Last year.
2 years.
Taka barishona, okay? All right, let's create this scenario, okay? We're creating this scenario. You know, to be Yotze the shofar, you have to hear a tekiah. Then, right, that's the cookie. Then you hear what's in the middle, that's the cream. And then you hear a tekiah afterwards. So our minhag is tekiah, shvarim trua, tekiah. Tekiah, shvarim trua, tekiah. Tekiah, shvarim trua, tekiah. Let's say that the guy blew tekiah, shvarim trua, and now a very long tekiah.
To be the
Right?
last
A
one.
very
and the
long
first one.
tekiah to be the last one of the first set and the first one of the second set. Is that count? Is that good?
Double dipping, isn't it?
long one. If it has to be 16 beats. you blow a 32 beat tequila.
Correct.
You know,
It's
or
one
40
Correct.
beat.
note-
What?
It's one note instead of two, it's supposed to be 100 notes.
Right.
Well, is it? I mean, it
Does it
is.
have to be 100
it's-
notes, or does it have to be
100
time
It's
that 100
technically
separate
it's
sounds?
technically one note because there's no break,
Yeah.
but Shvarim Trua is also one note, or Trua is also one note, even though there's 9 breaks to
But if you're
it.
supposed to get to
Right.
100, and that counts as
One.
one as opposed
But
to
a Trua
two.
doesn't count as 9.
No, it only counts as
No,
one.
even
Trua
so.
counts as 1. So I'm saying so these
So it's one thing
divisions
to
are
put 'em together,
artificial.
yeah.
Right, these divisions are somewhat artificial, but this is precisely Rabbah's point. If Rabbah is true, if Rabbah is correct that you can hear part of the tekiah and biyotze,
And that would be fine.
right? So then,
The one long note doesn't.
so the Brisa says that under these circumstances, Takav Rishona umashach b'shniya kishtayim ein biyado ela achas. What's the psak of the Brisa? The Brisa says it only counts as one. Right? It
And
only counts as
contradicts.
one. In other words, it's like, okay, 16 beats of tekiah, let's say 14 beats of shvarim trua, now 32 beats of tekiah. All that is a long tekiah.
That's it. It's just one.
That's what the Brisa says. You can't divide it up into 2. Va'amai, but if what Rabbah says is true, meaning if you hear part of it,
And you've heard all of
you should be
Yeah.
yotze
It doesn't matter.
to salek la bitarte. Why not just divide it up into 2 and count the first part of it for the last tekiah of the first set, and the second part of it for the first tekiah of the second set. So since we don't do that, that must mean that Rabbah is not correct.
No.
Says the Gemara, no, it's not a good proof. Why? Psuke tikiasa mehadade lo paskinan. You could say that Rabbah is correct, and you can say that hearing part of the tekiah counts.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we allow you to divide one tekiah into
Into two,
two
right.
separate ones. So this is not a good proof against Rabbah. Okay, that's what the Gemara's done. Gemara's taken Rabbah's position, said, does this disprove Rabbah? And the Gemara has come along and said no. Okay, next case. What's the next case? Tashma. Okay, we're going to try it again. Hatokeya l'socha bora l'socha dusa l'socha pitam.
That's a
Right?
barrel.
What?
Pitam is barrel.
Pitam is a barrel, yes. Im kol shofar shama, if you hear the sound of the shofar, yatsa. V'im kol havara shama lo yatsa. And if you hear the echo, lo yatsa.
We
Okay?
knew that already.
Right? We've learned that already. Says the Gemara, va'amai. But why is that true? In other words, if what Rabbah is saying is correct,
You only have to hear
Right?
part of it. Right.
that you only have to hear part of it, lipuk bitchilas tekiah mikmi dili irbav kala. What is he saying? He's saying, why isn't the part of the tekiah that you hear
First, which is the original.
before the
The
echo gets mixed into it?
Enough.
Why isn't that enough? Right? Why isn't that should be sufficient
Right.
according to Rabbah? So the Gemara accepts this as a
Rebuttal.
proof, as a rebuttal of Rabbah. The Gemara says, based on this, Rabbah can't be saying what he's saying. So Rabbah can't be saying that part of the tekiah is what you hear in your Yotze, Ella, but rather we have to now reinterpret Rabbah. And that's what the Gemara is going to do. Ki ka'amar Rabbah, what was Rabbah talking about in his case, which was on the very first line, right? I portrayed the case to you just to mislead you a little bit as the guy who's climbing out on the ladder. He hears part of it while he's in the bur, and now he's on top and he hears the echo. But ki ka'amar Rabbah, that's not really what Rabbah was talking about, says the Gemara. The Gemara is describing another case. Who is climbing up the ladder?
You're blowing the shofar.
the guy blowing the shofar. All right, he's got to be a little bit. He's got to be a little bit
God bless him if you can.
multitasking here, right? Multitasking here. All right. In other words, maybe we'll have to portray it
This
not
is
as
an
a ladder but as a
intellectual,
ramp,
exercise, yeah.
right? In other words,
Climbing up the ramp.
he's climbing up. He's
Spider
climbing
ball.
up the ramp.
Right.
Or he's on an escalator. There you go. Good. He's on an escalator.
It's a big boy.
Shkayach, Larry. Right. He's on an escalator. He's coming out of. He's coming out. Coming out of Grand Central Station.
Right.
I'm sorry. He's coming out of Penn
the cave.
Station.
Right.
He's coming out of Penn Station onto.
Oh, but if he's coming out of a
But there's an
cave.
echo there anyhow.
You could just be walking out of a cave.
Right. Right.
He
He's
could be walking out of a cave.
whatever it is. Okay. So, what does Rabbah say? Rabbah says. Rabbah says. Va'ola lenafshe. He's been Yotzei. So now, don't lose your place,
The
but
guy
let's go back
blowing
up
the
to the
shofar
top.
is Yotzei?
Yeah, go back up to the top and look at the first line.
Hurt himself?
Shama miktsas tekiah, babur. He heard part of the tekiah in the bor. He's blowing it,
Right, and he heard the rest
right?
of it outside. the
Miktsas
door.
tekiah al sfasabor, but he's still blowing it, right? He's still blowing it. So he's clearly Yotzei. That's how the Gemara wants to understand Rabbah, because to understand Rabbah differently is going to run into a conflict with this brisa. So the Gemara reinterprets Rabbah and says the situation must be the guy is on an escalator coming out of the bor, or he's walking out of the cave, and he's blowing in the cave. Well, when he's blowing in the cave, what does he hear? He's
The
hearing the
actual sound.
direct sound of the shofar. It happens to be mixed in with an echo, but he doesn't. It's not perceptible to him. And then he goes outside,
The echo's
and
gone.
the echo is gone, but it doesn't sound any different to him because he's still hearing the direct sound of the shofar. All right, so
Interesting.
right, so that's how the Gemara revises Rabbah's opinion. Okay, that's how the Gemara revises Rabbah's opinion. So says the Gemara, Ihachi, if this is true, right? Ihachi, if this is true, my lememra, mahu detema zimnin demapik reshe, va'akati shofar babur. In other words, what does this seem to imply? You know, if you're the Gemara is going to give us another scenario. It's a little bit of a weird scenario. Not that the scenarios up until now have not been weird, but here's the scenario that the Gemara gives. Mahu detema, what would you say if zimnin demapik reshe, in other words, his ear is above the line of the pit, right? In other words, he's standing.
His head is like above the
He's standing
rim
on the
of
ladder.
Right.
His head, his ear is above the ground level, but his shofar is facing downward
Right.
into the bor. So Mahu, right? What
Wait
would
a second and take another step.
right? Right? What would you
Up or
what would
down?
you say under those circumstances? Right? So my remember what would you say? Ma'u detema zimna demapik reishi ve'akasi shofar babor v'kama arvev kala. In other words, what the Gemara is saying is, wait a second. You guys sense this. The guy's blowing the shofar in the cave or in the bor, and now he's walking out of the cave and he's still blowing the shofar, and along comes Rabbah and says he's Yotzei.
Right.
Or he's taking the escalator out of the bor or whatever it is. Duh. Of course he's Yotzei. The Gemara should say Pshita.
Right,
In
well-
other words, he's the one who's blowing it. Of course he's Yotzei. So what are you telling me? If he walks out of the cave, what's the Chiddush? Right? What is Rabbah coming along to add by giving us this case? If all this case is telling me is the guy's walking out of the cave blowing the shofar, what's he coming to add? So the Gemara says he's coming to tell us the following: that we might have thought in a case where the ear of the shofar blower is above the pit line,
If you might have-
the shofar
Is
is
below
below it. We might have thought he's not Yotzei. Kamash Malan, along comes
I
Rabbah
don't think
to
if
tell
we
us.
sat here for another 5 years, So you come up.
along comes Rabbah to tell us he is Yotze, right? That under those circumstances, he is Yotze. That's the Chiddush. That's the Chiddush of Rabbah. Now, you might say, thanks a lot, Rabbah. How many times is this ever going to happen in life? But it's the point that Rabbah is driving home. In other words, you might have thought, let's say somebody presented you with this case. Somebody said, all right, what's the situation where the guy's ear is outside but the shofar is inside? You might have said, I don't know, maybe he's not Yotze, right? Maybe he's not Yotze. Along comes Rabbah to say, no, he is Yotze. Right? Kamash Milan, Rabbah comes to teach us that, right? Okay.
Since we're talking about hearing and what we're actually hearing and not hearing and maybe hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a famous story about the huge shul in Alexandria, and it was so big that when they had to say amen, they couldn't hear it in the back, so they would have some guy with a sign that says amen.
A flag.
Right.
Flags. He would wave the amen
So if
flags.
that's the case, what are they saying amen to? What are they actually hearing? What are they kavanah? Where's the kavanah? And if there was a shofar being blown, are they hearing it? Are they
Well,
not
they're not
hearing
even
it?
hearing you.
I mean, like.
So
how
it's
could-
these are all very good questions on that Gemara. In other words,
But
can
it's
you
again hearing.
answer
What-
amen
Something
to
you
a
didn't hear.
bracha that you
didn't hear.
didn't hear? In other words, let's say you would see me mouth a bracha. Could you answer amen? Could you say amen? Right? Or let's say you're watching this video and I make a bracha. Can you say amen? You're watching the video 3 days later. Can you say amen? Right? I mean, is
There
that
you're at least hearing.
right? So what are you? Yeah, but you're not hearing.
You're hearing it delayed.
Right.
At
So
least you're
what?
hearing
Right.
something.
What are you hearing?
not some guy
Right?
waving
You're
a
saying
flag.
amen. You're saying amen. You're not hearing anything.
Applause.
So the question is, might you just be fulfilling the obligation of joining in with the tzibur? You're joining in with the congregation to acknowledge, yes, whatever they're saying amen to, we're also saying amen
Because
to.
here you're in the presence of the activity, and the activity is clearly being done, and the component of it that you're responding to might or might not have been fully, transmitted to you, but you know what's going on, and you're acknowledging it, and you're nodding your head to it, and your kavanah is there. So, it's the same kind of stuff. It's like, you're all there. It's just that there's some little glitch in the process that it's so convoluted, but
Right.
you're there.
It's a great question with that Gemara. What are they answering amen to? And it goes into all kinds of halachas about answering
Okay,
amen.
anyway,
Okay, let's keep going. We have some more time. Okay, so the Gemara. So now we understand what Rabbah was teaching us. Okay,
Goodness.
right? So Kamash Milan. So we're on
Your
28.
ears are out and you're not
28A2 now. 28A2. Don't lose me. Amar Rav. Rav says. Amar Rav Yehuda. I'm sorry. Amar Rav Yehuda. We are now entering into a different discussion. Bishofar shel ola lo yitka. You should not blow the shofar of a karban ola. What does that mean? You brought a ram as a karban ola. What's a karban ola? A karban that is
Burn the whole thing, right?
completely consumed on the mizbeach. So the question is, what is the status of the horn of such an animal? Is the
do you
horn
burn it with the horn on the animal, or do you take the horn
right?
off first?
Well, if no one would take the horn off, the horn would be burned
Does it
with
burn?
the rest of the animal.
Does it get consumed, the horn?
Yeah. However,
Okay.
is that an obligation
To take the horn, to leave the horn.
to
there and
leave
let
the
it
horn
burn?
on? In other words, is the horn considered the
Obviously
same as
No.
the leg of the animal or the kishkas of the animal or something like that?
You can't take it off while the
Can't be.
animal's alive, right?
You can take a horn off while the animal's
Sure.
alive. They do that all the time.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
How do you
Can
get
an
the shofar?
Ola, Ola have a mum on it?
Well, so
No,
we're
but if they wouldn't
right.
ask the question, if it wasn't
Right,
a
so
kosher ola,
it's not.
It
It's
has to be a
actually
kosher
not a
ola,
move. It's
otherwise
not a
what's the
move.
point
Right?
of
It's
the
not
whole
a
thing?
move. Right, but let's see what the issue
so you
is
can
here.
certainly make some.
I'm a Rav Yehuda. B'shofar shel ola lo yitka v'im taka yatsa.
You shouldn't
Right?
use it, but if you do,
You
it's
shouldn't
okay.
use it, but if you did, you were Yotze. All right? You shouldn't use it, but if you did, you were Yotze. Okay, look at Rashi Shel Ola. Rashi is
A third.
yeah, sort of like a
Shel
third of the way
Ola.
up. A third of the way up. It says Shel Ola, right?
Yep.
So Rashi says Vitalshu Mechayim. You cut off the shofar while the animal was still alive. Di'ilu la'achar zerika, because if you had done it after zerika, in other words, after the animal has been killed and the blood has been sprinkled, ein mi'ila lo ba'ora velo bikarneha, right? So then it's not considered me'ila. Why? Shehakol la kohanim.
Right, it all
Because
belongs-
everything, the horns and the skin belong to the kohanim, and the kohanim can do whatever they want with it. In other words, it's not considered. It's not
Once it goes on
considered
the altar, you have to-
part of the carbon.
So
If
they
you
can
take
do
it off
they can
before.
do with it what they want, but that doesn't mean they can blow shofar with it.
No, so we're no the kohan. Well, let's see what the
So,
issue.
so it
right?
belongs, so the reason why it belongs to the Cohen, that the horns, right? Is that
No,
what
no,
you're saying?
only,
Right, here-
only
here's
if you
the
don't
story.
take it off when it's alive.
Here's the story. I've shechted the animal.
Right.
I've sprinkled the dam of the carbon ola on the
Okay,
mizbeach.
right.
You or the Kohanim?
Kohen has. Right now, the Kohen skins the animal.
Right, the skin belongs to the Kohen.
While the Kohen has his back turned, I
cut that
grab
part
the
off.
skin and run.
No, it's his.
Wow.
And
Right.
the horns are his.
Right? I grab the skin and run.
It's a sin.
Right? What sin is it?
Stealing.
Stealing.
All right, it's stealing. Okay, it's stealing. Let's say I grabbed a leg of the animal and ran.
Also stealing.
It's a steal. So you're stealing from God.
Stealing from Hashem,
What's
it's
it
still stealing.
called when you steal from Hashem?
A mistake.
No, it's,
He knows.
It's called me'ila. It's called me'ila.
Okay.
Me'ila means misappropriating a holy item.
Okay.
The skin is not a holy item.
Right.
It just belongs to the Kohen.
okay.
But the leg of the animal is a holy item. That is part of the korban
It
that
doesn't
has to
get
be
burned for
consumed
Hashem.
on the mizbeach.
Right.
Okay? So what we're saying here is you took the horn before the animal was the property, before these external things were the property of the Kohen.
Right.
Right? You took it before it became
Before the whole ritual process began.
correct. That's what Rashi
You
is
brought a
saying.
ram without a horn.
Right, that's
For
what
your own
Rashi
way.
is
You can do
saying.
that.
Right, that's what Rashi is saying. So under the no, not actually. Rashi is saying not. Rashi is not saying that. Rashi is saying this animal is already designated as
Once
an
it's
ola.
designated.
Ola.
It is designated as an ola. It's being brought as an ola.
Which means that the
Right.
whole animal.
The whole animal belongs
This
to the Hashem
animal
of the
is an
Kohanim.
ola. Right now, you cut off the horn.
We've taken from the
Right.
Kohanim.
So what's the story with that?
It's
That's
taken from
Stolen
Hashem.
property.
No, the horn
have you
belongs to the Kohanim.
have you taken
not
from
from Ola.
have
The
you
skin.
have you
No, the
stolen
skin.
from the Kohen or have you
Hashem.
stolen from Hashem? We'll see. This is
But
the
either
question.
way,
If you're
you've
going
taken
through the effort of bringing a cargo and you're repenting for something, why would you then put yourself like it's sort of
Oh,
like
because you don't have to get
schizophrenic?
more than you have to.
No, I mean I don't know. It's
Skin is fine.
again.
Why
Again,
can't
I
you
mean
keep it?
you're
I know
right.
you're trying to prove a point.
You're right
I
that the
understand.
Gemara is trying to prove the point. That's the
Right.
bottom line. The Gemara is trying to tease out the point here.
The
Okay?
nuances. The nuances.
Right? The nuances, correct. Okay? So under these circumstances, v'im taka, let's say you went ahead and, so lichatchila, you shouldn't do it.
Right.
But you went ahead and did it anyway, v'im taka, bidievid, yotza. You have
Because it's a
fulfilled,
perfectly good.
you have
shofar.
fulfilled your obligation. Why?
Because it's a good shofar.
Why have you fulfilled your obligation?
It's not a puzzle shofar.
Okay?
I mean,
it's-
you may have committed a
Okay.
violation somewhere or
If
a
I-
Avera.
Oh, say that again?
I take you to Finland. In the morning, you came up.
Or I take your shofar.
You came before I got there.
Yeah,
you
and-
put on my tefillin.
Yes.
Without your permission.
Yeah. Bad thing
That's
to do.
that's not considered geneva.
Right, but
Right.
okay, but it's,
If I take your
but-
shofar,
but-
blow
Wait
it,
a,
and I
wait a
give it
second.
back.
Wait a second.
But I've
If
done my
we're-
obligation. I've done my
if-
obligation
right.
dominant.
if we assume that shofar belongs to the Kohen.
Right.
Okay.
So you are blowing with a stolen shofar.
Okay.
Right? If you're blowing with a stolen shofar, that might very well be a mitzvah haba ba'avera.
Okay.
Right?
That's
A
fine.
mitzvah haba ba'avera ain't a mitzvah. That's one scenario.
How do you know you wouldn't
Wait,
return the
wait, hold
shofar
on.
just like you
Hold on.
returned
That's
the
one
tefillah?
scenario. That's one scenario. Doesn't matter. At the time you were doing it, you don't have permission. By tefillin, there's an implicit permission. As long as somebody
Okay.
wraps up my tefillin the same way,
I
the
see.
assumption is that there's position.
Okay.
That there-
Okay.
Now, but there's another scenario here. Let's say that the horn was taken from the animal when the animal had already been designated as a carbon, and the horn now has a kedusha element to it, and it's stealing from God.
Right.
It's me'ilah. All right. Does
not
that make a
Geneva
difference?
anymore.
If you steal from God, is that shofar sound good or not?
Yeah.
We'll start with this. We'll start with this next week.
Oh, we're not gonna- no, no,